What if I told you that a janitor could be a better investor than a top Wall Street executive? I know, it sounds completely impossible, right? But it actually happened. In this explainer, we're diving into this incredible idea from Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money. And we're going to see why, when it comes to your finances, how you behave is so much more important than how smart you are.
So to really get this, we've got to look at a story that just seems to defy all logic. It's the tale of two guys whose financial lives went in completely opposite directions.
Okay, on one side of the coin, you have Ronald Read. He was a lifelong janitor and gas station attendant, lived a really simple life. When he died at 92, people were stunned to learn he'd quietly built an $8 million fortune, which he left to his local hospital and library. Then you've got Richard Fuscone, Harvard-educated, top executive at Merrill Lynch, the whole 9 yards. He was so successful he retired in his 40s to a mansion the size of a hotel. But he was borrowing like crazy to fund this lifestyle. And when the 2008 financial crisis hit, his entire fortune just vanished. He went bankrupt.
This is the question, isn't it? How does that even happen? How does a guy with zero formal financial training build a massive fortune, while a Harvard-educated expert, a literal captain of the industry, loses everything? Well, the answer changes everything.
I mean, really think about it. Would you ever hear a story about a janitor performing a better heart transplant than a top surgeon? Of course not. Or designing a safer bridge than a world-class engineer? No way. But in finance, this stuff happens. Ronald Read and Richard Fuscone can exist in the same world, and understanding why really changes how we should all be thinking about money.
So, the answer to that whole puzzle, it lies in a huge misunderstanding. We're all taught to think about money and investing as a hard science, like physics. But it's not. It's actually a soft skill.
And this is the core idea right here. The psychology of money isn't about knowing fancy formulas, it's all about behavior. It's about your patience, your discipline, your relationship with fear and greed. These emotional skills have a way bigger impact on your net worth than anything you could learn in a textbook. Ronald Read was patient, Richard Fuscone was greedy. And at the end of the day, that single behavioral difference mattered more than any PhD or MBA ever could.
This quote from the book just absolutely nails it. Your IQ is no defense against your own emotional impulses. In fact, sometimes being a genius just gives you more creative ways to mess things up financially.
Okay, get this. There's this true story about a tech executive, a certified genius who literally held patents for key parts of Wi-Fi. He was brilliant and wildly successful, but he also carried around huge wads of cash, bragged constantly, and one time, just for kicks, he and his friends stood on a dock and literally skipped thousands of dollars worth of gold coins across the water. So, it's really no surprise what happened next, right? He went broke. A total genius, completely undone by his own behavior. So if behavior is the key, then we really need to understand the why behind it. And that brings us to this simple but really profound idea that explains so much about how we all deal with money.
It's such a simple statement, but it's incredibly powerful. We see people doing things with their money that look absolutely insane to us. But here's the thing, nobody thinks they're being crazy. Every single financial decision a person makes perfect sense to them in that moment, based on their unique picture of how the world works.
And here's why. Every one of us has only experienced this tiny, microscopic sliver of what's happened in economic history. But that tiny personal sliver, the money conversations you heard growing up, the economy when you first started working, that stuff overwhelmingly shapes your beliefs. It forms something like 80% of your entire financial worldview.
This chart just shows it so clearly. Look at the difference. If you were born in 1970, you watched the stock market grow tenfold while you were coming of age. You learned that stocks are these incredible wealth-building machines. But if you were born just 20 years earlier, in 1950, the market basically went nowhere for those same years. You learned that stocks are super risky and don't really pay off. It's the same market, but two people learned completely opposite lessons.
And it's the exact same story with inflation. If you were born in 1960, you watched prices more than triple during your teens and 20s. You learned to be terrified of inflation. But if you were born in 1990, inflation has been so low for your entire life, you probably barely ever think about it. Neither person is crazy. They just learned different lessons because they grew up in totally different worlds.
All right, now let's add one more layer to this that makes everything even more challenging. It's not just that our experiences are different, it's that we are all playing a game that is shockingly brand new.
Think about things like retirement planning, 401ks, or index funds. We treat them like they've been around forever, but they haven't. They're basically infants. We expect ourselves to be experts at a game where the rules were pretty much written yesterday. So of course we struggle. We're all just figuring this out as we go.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It's kind of wild. Social Security is barely 2 generations old. The 401k, which is the bedrock of retirement for so many, wasn't even invented until 1978. And the Roth IRA? 1998. If it were a person, it would just be getting started in its career. We're all just kind of winging it, learning from a very, very short history of trial and error.
So let's bring all of this home. What does this actually mean for you and me?
At the end of the day, our financial decisions aren't made on a spreadsheet. They're made in our heads, and they're based on stories. The stories we tell ourselves about risk, about opportunity, about what it means to feel safe and secure. And those stories, they're written by our own unique, personal history with money.
I know we're showing this quote again, but it is so important. If you take away just one thing from all this, please let it be this. That tiny slice of life that you've lived has this outsized grip on your financial brain. And just recognizing that fact, that your view is unique and it's incomplete, that's the first huge step. It allows you to make better decisions and maybe have a little more empathy for why other people do what they do.
The goal here isn't to make you a math genius. It's to encourage you to become a bit of a historian of your own life with money, to understand the lessons you learned without even realizing you were learning them. Because once you understand your own financial story, you get the power to write the next chapter. So I'll leave you with this question. What's your story?